Welcome, dear listener, to a quiet space where stories from America's past come alive. Tonight, rest your head and let me share tales filled with monsters, magic, and legendary heroes, woven from the folklore and forgotten corners of this vast land. These stories aren't just about history. They're about wonder, of towering lumberjacks, mysterious creatures in shadowed woods, brave spirits, and the quiet magic that lingers in every state and season. Some tales may give you chills, others will bring comfort, but each one is meant to calm your mind and ease you into sleep. Whether you're winding down after a long day or tucked under the covers ready to drift off, you're in the right place. No rush, no noise, just gentle storytelling to carry you away. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Are you winding down for the night or just taking a quiet moment for yourself? If this sounds like the kind of journey you'd enjoy, feel free to like and subscribe so you won't miss the stories still to come. Now close your eyes and let us set the scene. Long ago, in the early 1700s, the Leeds family lived in a modest farmhouse on the edge of the forest. The family was simple and hardworking, and Mrs. Leeds was about to give birth to her 13th child. The townsfolk had already begun to whisper behind closed doors. 13 children were unlucky, some said, and Mrs. Leeds herself was known to be a harsh, bitter woman who resented her many pregnancies. As her due date neared, the atmosphere around the Leeds home grew heavy. The winds seemed colder, the nights darker, and the forest itself seemed to watch. Some claimed to hear strange sounds from the woods, unearthly cries and shrieks that no animal could make. On a stormy night, with rain hammering the roof and thunder roaring above, Mrs. Leeds went into labor. Inside the small house, only the flickering light of a dying candle fought the shadows. The family gathered around, tense and worried. When the baby was born, it was unlike any child they had ever seen. The room filled with a scream that was not human, a wild, terrible wail that seemed to tear through the night. The child had the head of a goat, its eyes glowing with a fierce red fire. Its body was covered in dark, coarse fur, and bat-like wings sprouted from its back. Sharp claws extended from its tiny hands, and a long forked tail flicked behind it. Mrs. Leeds screamed in horror and dropped the creature onto the floor. The family backed away, terror-stricken. The monstrous infant let out another piercing cry, flapped its wings, and with surprising strength, it leapt from the floor, flapping clumsily but fiercely. Before anyone could stop it, the creature flew through the open window and vanished into the stormy night. From that night on, the people of the Pine Barrens spoke only in whispers of the Jersey Devil, a creature born of a cursed birth, a monster that haunted the forest and the night. Stories spread fast. Farmers found their livestock slaughtered, torn apart with savage precision. Strange tracks, hoofprints mixed with claw marks, appeared in the muddy trails. At night, travelers heard wild screams echoing from the woods, chilling them to their bones. Decades passed, and the legend grew. The Jersey Devil became more than just a creature. It was a force of nature, a wild spirit of the forest that no one could control or predict. Hunters told tales of glowing eyes peering through the darkness, of shadowy wings blotting out the moon. People swore they heard the creature's screams as it soared overhead, a haunting, blood-curdling sound that stopped hearts and froze feet in their tracks. No one dared to chase it. No one dared to follow the terrifying wails into the forest. The legend became a part of the community's very identity. Mothers warned their children not to wander near the barrens after dark. Men spoke of the creature in taverns, half joking, half afraid. The Jersey Devil was blamed for every unexplained misfortune: lost pets, strange noises, and sudden accidents. The story took a new turn in the late 1800s when a series of reported sightings made headlines across New Jersey. Newspapers published letters from terrified witnesses who claimed to have seen the beast soaring above treetops or lurking just beyond their campfires. One chilling account told of a group of hunters who, while deep in the barrens, were chased by a winged creature emitting a scream so fierce it drove them into a panic. Some say the Jersey Devil was a curse placed on the Leeds family for sins long buried, a punishment for a dark secret no one dared speak aloud. Others believed it was a guardian of the forest, punishing those who destroyed its home or dared to challenge the wild. Over time, skeptics tried to explain it away. Claims of misidentified animals, hoaxes, or simple superstition. Yet the legend endured. Sightings and strange noises persisted well into the 20th century and beyond. The Jersey Devil was woven into the fabric of New Jersey folklore, a reminder that some mysteries refuse to be solved. In truth, the Jersey Devil is more than a monster story. It is a symbol of the unknown lurking beyond the edges of civilization, of nature's untamed power, and of the fears we carry deep inside ourselves. It reminds us that no matter how much we try to control the world, there are forces wild and ancient that resist. To this day, people venture into the pine barrens, drawn by curiosity or dare, hoping to catch a glimpse of the legendary creature. On quiet nights, when the wind rustles the leaves just right, some say you can still hear its scream carried on the breeze, a chilling reminder that the Jersey Devil is still out there, watching, waiting, wild and free. And so, the legend lives on. An eerie story passed from one generation to the next, forever entwined with the dark forests of New Jersey, where shadows move just a little too fast and the night holds secrets no one can fully explain. Now, let's journey north to meet a giant lumberjack and his magical companion, Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox. Far out in the vast wild forests of North America, where the trees stood taller than the clouds and the rivers ran wild and free, there lived a man unlike any other. His name was Paul Bunyan, a giant of a man with strength as mighty as the mountains and a heart as big as the endless skies. But Paul wasn't just any lumberjack. He was a legend in the making, a hero of the frontier and the master of the great wilderness. Paul's story began long before the first settlers arrived, when the forests were endless and the land was raw and untamed. They say Paul was born in the heart of the wilderness, his cries echoing through the trees like thunder rolling across the hills. So massive was he at birth that the cradle had to be carved from a hollowed-out log as big as a small boat, and the midwives whispered in awe and fear that no ordinary child could grow so quickly. From the very first moments of his life, Paul was extraordinary. By the time he was a toddler, he could lift entire trees as if they were mere sticks. The people around him, loggers and woodsmen, watched with amazement and some with a little fear. But Paul was not just strength and size. Deep inside him lived a gentle spirit, one that loved the forest as much as he loved the people who called it home. No story of Paul Bunyan would be complete without his remarkable companion, Babe the Blue Ox. Babe was no ordinary ox. Towering beside Paul, his coat shimmered a brilliant blue, as if he had been dipped in the summer sky itself. Some folks said Babe got his blue color from rolling in wild blueberry patches, stained forever by nature's paint. Others believe Babe was born from the clouds, sent by the spirits of the forest to protect Paul. Whatever the truth, Babe was a creature of unmatched strength and calm, a steadfast partner who never left Paul's side. Together, Paul and Babe roamed the vast wilderness. Where Paul swung his mighty axe, whole forests would fall, opening the land for settlers and explorers. Babe's gigantic footsteps shaped the earth, carving valleys and creating rivers as he walked. One story tells that Babe's footprints became the Great Lakes, those vast shimmering bodies of water that mirrored the sky above. The legends say that Paul's laughter could shake the forest. When he laughed, the birds would fall silent and the trees would seem to lean closer, listening. But Paul was no careless giant. Despite his strength, he treated the forest with respect. He knew the woods had life and spirit, and he worked with nature, not against it. Winter was a time when Paul and Babe showed the full extent of their powers. As the cold crept in, blanketing the land with snow and ice, Paul would carve deep trenches to guide rivers, preventing floods and creating ponds for animals and people to drink from. Babe's breath was said to be so cold that it could freeze lakes overnight, crafting perfect ice for skating and fishing in the towns that were beginning to sprout around the edges of the wilderness. As towns grew and more people arrived, Paul and Babe became more than just protectors of the forest. They became symbols of hope and strength. When settlers got lost in the woods or faced danger, Paul and Babe were there, clearing paths, guiding them to safety, and helping build a new world from the wild earth. One of the most famous tales tells of how Paul Bunyan created the Grand Canyon. It's said that during a great journey across the land, Paul tripped and stumbled, and his massive foot scraped the earth, carving out a deep, wide gorge that stretched for miles. When Babe came to Paul's aid, his own hoof pressed into the earth, deepening the canyon and forming the Colorado River that now flows through it. This was no ordinary accident. It was the work of giants shaping the world, leaving behind wonders that people would admire for centuries. But Paul wasn't just a force of nature, he was a man with a heart. Despite his size, he had a soft spot for children and animals alike. Stories speak of him gently lifting a tiny lost bird back to its nest or stopping his great axe to listen to the cry of a wounded deer. His laughter, though thunderous, was kind, and his eyes sparkled with the joy of living in harmony with the land. Babe too was more than muscle and size. The Blue Ox was patient, wise, and fiercely loyal. When storms threatened to tear apart the forests, Babe would stand tall and steady, calming the wind with his presence. When people doubted the strength of nature, Babe's steady breath and gentle gaze reminded them that even the wildest forces could be tamed with respect and care. The friendship between Paul and Babe was legendary. They depended on each other, shared every hardship, and celebrated every victory. Without Babe, Paul would be just a giant lost in the wilderness, and without Paul, Babe would be a mighty beast with no purpose. Together, they were the heart and soul of the frontier. As time passed and the wilderness gave way to civilization, Paul and Babe's stories only grew larger. Some say Paul's footprints formed the rolling hills of the Appalachians, and Babe's mighty roar became the rumble of thunder across the plains. Though the forest shrank and the town spread, the spirit of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox lived on in every tree that was felled, every river that was guided, and every new path carved through the wild. Even now, if you wander into the thick forests or stand beside a great lake, you might feel the presence of Paul and Babe. Maybe it's the whisper of the wind through the trees, or the distant echo of a booming laugh carried across the valley. Perhaps it's the sight of a blue shape moving just beyond the tree line, or the sudden chill that brushes your skin like a giant's breath. The tale of Paul Bunyan and Babe the Blue Ox is more than just a story. It's a reminder of how nature and humanity can coexist, how strength is not only measured by size but by kindness and respect, and how even the mightiest giants need friendship and love. From mighty forests to ghostly roads, we now ride with the Headless Horseman. In the stillness of early autumn, when the last of summer's warmth clings to the air and the leaves begin to catch fire with orange and gold, the Hudson Valley of New York holds a secret. Nestled among the misty hills and winding rivers lies the quiet village of Sleepy Hollow, a place that seems untouched by time, cloaked in shadow, where whispers move faster than the wind. Sleepy Hollow was known far and wide, not for its bustling markets or mighty monuments, but for its silence, an eerie, dreamlike hush that settled over the town like a spell. The villagers were a superstitious sort, their lives ruled as much by old ghost tales as by the rising sun. And of all the stories passed from porch to porch, none chilled the bone like that of the Headless Horseman. They said he was a Hessian soldier who had lost his head to a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. He was buried hastily in the churchyard of Sleepy Hollow, but his soul never found rest. On moonlit nights, especially in autumn, he would rise, riding forth on a black steed with eyes like burning coals, searching for his lost head. No one had ever seen his face, because he had none. And in place of a head, he carried a pumpkin, sometimes carved, sometimes whole, gripped tight in one spectral hand. The pounding of his horse's hooves was said to shake the very ground, and if he caught you, well, none could say what happened next, for those who met him never returned. It was into this world of mist and myth that a schoolmaster named Ichabod Crane arrived. Tall, lanky, and awkward, with sharp elbows and a long nose, Ichabod was as curious as he was nervous. He came to teach the children of Sleepy Hollow, but quickly found himself fascinated, perhaps even obsessed with the strange tales of the region. He was a firm believer in spirits, reading every book he could find on the supernatural. The Headless Horseman, in particular, haunted his imagination. By day, Ichabod taught lessons and wandered the woods, gathering flowers and stories alike. By night, he stayed late at the homes of local farmers, wide-eyed by candlelight as they recounted their ghostly encounters. He listened, nodding solemnly, though his knees trembled under the table. But it wasn't just spirits that stirred his heart. Ichabod had fallen hopelessly in love with Katrina Van Tissel, the only daughter of a wealthy farmer. Katrina was young, lively, and quick-witted, and Ichabod dreamed not only of her hand in marriage, but of inheriting her father's vast lands. But he was not the only suitor. His chief rival was Brom Bones, a local hero, bold, broad-shouldered, with a booming laugh and a knack for mischief. Brom could ride like the wind, fight like a soldier, and charm a crowd with a grin. Ichabod's timid nature stood no chance against Brom's brawn, and the two began a silent war of pranks, looks, and one-upmanship. Still, Ichabod believed he had a chance, especially after he received an invitation to a harvest party at the Van Tissel estate. The night of the party, the air was crisp, and the moon hung low. The estate was lit with lanterns, music, and laughter, the scent of cider and roasted apples filling the air. Ichabod danced and sang, his spirits high as he stole moments to speak with Katrina. But as the evening wound down, stories of ghosts crept into the conversation, and naturally, the tale of the Headless Horseman took center stage. Brom Bones, in the theatrical tone, told of a rider he claimed to have outrun on a stormy night. Laughter followed, but Ichabod didn't join in. His mind had already wandered into the dark. Later that night, Ichabod mounted his horse, a borrowed scrawny creature named Gunpowder, and began the lonely ride home. The trees loomed taller in the dark, their branches twisting like gnarled hands. Every rustle of leaves, every creaking twig made his heart beat faster. As he approached the infamous bridge near the old churchyard, the very spot where the horseman was said to vanish, he heard it, a sound like thunder behind him. Hoofbeats. At first he dared not look. He kicked Gunpowder to go faster. But the hoofbeats grew louder, closer. Finally he turned, and what he saw nearly froze his blood. Behind him rode a towering figure on a massive black horse, cloaked in shadows, with no head upon its shoulders, only a dark, jagged stump, and in one hand, raised high, the figure held a flaming pumpkin. Ichabod screamed and urged his poor horse forward, racing toward the bridge. The horseman followed, silent except for the terrifying rhythm of hooves striking the ground. Ichabod knew the legend. If he could only reach the bridge, he might be safe. Branches whipped past. Wind tore at his coat. The horseman drew closer. They reached the bridge. Ichabod surged across, his eyes wide with terror, Gunpowder stumbling beneath him. For a brief moment silence returned. He turned again. Had he made it? The horseman reared his mount, raised the pumpkin high, and hurled it. There was a blinding flash of orange and black, and then nothing. The next morning, Ichabod's horse returned to town, riderless. Villagers found hoofprints by the bridge, and beside them, a shattered pumpkin. Ichabod Crane was never seen in Sleepy Hollow again. Some say he fled, humiliated by Brom's cruel prank. Others believe he was taken by the horseman, spirited away into the woods, lost forever in the fog of the hollow. But when the wind howls through the valley and the moon rises full, the villagers still look over their shoulders, for the Headless Horseman rides again, searching, always searching, for his lost head, and perhaps for the next poor soul who dares to ride alone through Sleepy Hollow. Soaring high next, we meet the mighty thunderbird, protector of the skies long before the cities rose and the roads were carved through the land. When the world was still young and the sky stretched forever, the people of the great plains and mountains spoke of a being so powerful, so awe-inspiring, that even the storms bowed in its presence. They called it Thunderbird, the great winged spirit of the sky. This was no ordinary bird, nor even a beast that could be named alongside bear or wolf. The Thunderbird was a creature of legend, born from the heartbeat of the sky itself, cloaked in rolling clouds and crowned with lightning. Its wings spanned so wide that when it flew, it cast shadows as large enough to turn day into dusk. Its eyes glowed like burning suns, and its cry cracked across the sky like thunder tearing through the heavens. They say when the Thunderbird soared, storms followed. Rain poured down from beneath its wings, and bolts of lightning shot from its eyes. With each flap, it stirred the wind into gales, bending the tallest trees and stirring the rivers into foam. But the Thunderbird was not a destroyer. It was a guardian, a protector of balance, a sacred force that watched over the world. Among the people of the Pacific Northwest, the Thunderbird was a revered spirit being. The elders told of the time when the Thunderbird saved the world from a terrible evil, the monstrous whales that threatened to swallow the land whole. These whales were not like those of the sea today, but great beasts with hunger so deep they devoured entire villages. When the whales grew too bold, the earth cried out, and the Thunderbird answered. It descended from the storm clouds, its wings churning the skies black. Lightning laced its feathers, and thunder roared from its chest. With its mighty talons, it snatched the whales from the sea, lifting them high above the mountains and hurling them to the rocks below. The ground shook for days, and the ocean trembled in fear. The people sang praises to Thunderbird, carving its image into totems, painting its wings across their drums, honoring the savior who had kept their word intact. But not all stories of Thunderbird are of war and wrath. In one old tale told by the Lakota, Thunderbird is not only the stormbringer, but the keeper of justice. Long ago, in a quiet valley, a village had forgotten to honor the spirits. They grew greedy, tearing too many trees, hunting not for need but for pride, and speaking harshly of the old ways. The earth dimmed, the rivers thinned, and clouds began to gather. The elders warned of Thunderbird's anger, but the people did not listen. One night, as a blood moon rose above the mountains, Thunderbird came. It descended with no warning, wings dark as night, but glowing at the edges with electric fire. The sky tore open with its arrival, thunder crashing like the voice of the ancestors. Lightning struck the plains in webs of white fire. The people ran, but there was no escaping the spirit of the sky, and yet, in its fury, Thunderbird did not destroy the village. It circled it once, twice, and then soared upward, disappearing into the clouds. The next morning the fields were scorched, but the homes remained. The message was clear: honor the earth, or face the sky's justice. From that day forward, the village changed. They gave thanks in every hunt, planted trees for everyone they took, and sang to the spirits with drums that echoed the beat of Thunderbird's wings. But perhaps the most powerful tale is the one not told in words, but in feeling. When you stand on a mountaintop as a summer storm rolls in, and you feel the wind shift suddenly, brushing your face like an unseen wingtip. You hear thunder that doesn't rumble but cracks sharply like a voice calling your name. You see lightning not as a strike but a flash of something alive in the sky. That is Thunderbird. To many native tribes, Thunderbird is not a what, but a who. It is alive in the weather, watching from beyond the clouds. It doesn't need to be seen to be believed. It doesn't need a name to be known. It is felt in the electric stillness before a storm, in the fierce wind that bends the forest, in the sound of a drumbeat echoing across the plains. Sometimes children ask, "Has anyone ever seen the Thunderbird?" The elders smile, their eyes holding storms of memory. Only those who need to, they say, only when the sky chooses to reveal it. One story speaks of a young boy, small and sickly, who wandered into the woods alone one summer evening. He was lost, frightened, too weak to climb back up the ridge. Night fell, and with it came a sudden storm, lightning, wind, and a sky that roared. The boy huddled beneath a tree, certain he would not see the dawn. Then a shape appeared overhead, vast and shimmering, outlined in blue fire. A single feather fell, longer than the boy was tall, glowing faintly in the dark. It drifted down and touched his forehead. When morning came, the storm was gone, and the boy was found by his people, strong and unafraid. He grew into a wise man, a healer, his hands warm with something the tribe could never explain. When asked what had saved him, he would simply look to the sky and whisper, "Thunderbird." Even now, in the remote wild places, people claim to hear it. An impossible bird call in the thunder, a great shadow crossing the sunlit land. And when a storm breaks too fast or lightning splits the sky straight and sharp, someone always says, "The thunderbird flies today." It is more than a legend. It is a living memory etched into the earth and sky, a spirit as old as the mountains and as wild as the wind. So when the clouds gather and the thunder rolls low, remember the stories. Remember the feathers carved into ancient wood, the song sung to the sky. Look up, the thunderbird may be watching. Now, let's turn to a story of courage and peace from early America, Pocahontas and the Powhatan spirit. Long ago, when the rivers of Virginia flowed clean and free through the thick forests and the wind still carried the scent of pine and cedar, there lived a girl born to the heart of a powerful people. She was known as Pocahontas, the beloved daughter of Chief Powhatan, ruler of more than 30 tribes of the Tidewater region. Her true name was Matuka, but Pocahontas, meaning playful one, suited her wild spirit and easy laughter. Pocahontas was not a princess in the way outsiders imagined, with crowns or palaces. She was something far greater, a bridge between worlds, chosen not by blood alone, but by the spirits of her people. She moved like the wind through the forest, fast and silent, her feet never seeming to touch the earth. Animals trusted her, children followed her, and even the oldest elders paused when she spoke. The forest was her home, and she knew it like a second skin. The hidden trails, the whisper of the birds, the meanings in the movement of the trees. But Pocahontas was not just a child of the forest. She was the daughter of a chief, raised with the songs of the ancestors and the wisdom of the earth. Among her people, stories were sacred. They said that each person carried within them a spirit, a spark of the great mystery. Pocahontas, even as a child, was said to carry the spirit of Ahone, the Powhatan god of creation and peace. Where others sought to conquer, she sought to understand. Where others saw enemies, she looked for kinship, but change was coming. In the summer of her 12th year, strangers arrived by ship, tall ships with sails like clouds, anchoring in the bay like floating bones. The English, pale-skinned and loud, stepped onto the shores of Tazinacomaca and began to build fences, cut trees, and take what they did not yet understand. Chief Powhatan, wise and watchful, sent messengers. There was no war yet, but there was fear. Pocahontas watched from the woods, her dark eyes studying these newcomers. She saw their hunger, their sickness, their strange metal tools, and their even stranger ways. But more than anything, she saw their loneliness. They were far from home, clinging to the soil as if it would reject them. Among them was a man named John Smith, brave but proud, who walked the forest like a man unafraid, though he knew little of its dangers. One day, venturing too far, he was captured by warriors and brought before Chief Powhatan. The council debated, should they kill this man or spare him? And then Pocahontas stepped forward. She was no longer a laughing girl in the woods. She walked calmly into the firelight, eyes locked on her father's. Without a word, she knelt beside the stranger, placing her own head above his. The fire crackled. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Chief Powhatan looked at his daughter, at the fearless way she protected a man who was nothing like her, and something ancient stirred in him. The old stories, the spirit of peace. He spared John Smith's life. From that day forward, Pocahontas moved between the two worlds like a song caught between verses. She visited the settlers often, bringing food during the harsh winters, teaching them which roots would heal, which berries would harm. The settlers called her a savior, but to her people she was something deeper, a living sign of the Powhatan spirit of balance. And yet balance is not easily kept. Years passed, the settlers grew in number and hunger. Treaties broke, trust wore thin. Pocahontas, caught between her people and the settlers, felt the weight of two worlds pressing against her. She still believed peace was possible, but peace, she would learn, often comes at great cost. One day, lured onto an English ship under the pretense of diplomacy, Pocahontas was taken, kidnapped, held as a prisoner in Jamestown. She was told she could only see her people if she agreed to certain terms: conversion, marriage, obedience. In captivity, Pocahontas changed. They baptized her, dressed her in English gowns, gave her a new name, Rebecca. They called her a Christian. They told her she was civilized. But inside, Pocahontas still carried the wind, the trees, the voice of her ancestors. She married an Englishman named John Rolfe, not out of love, but to end the war, to protect her people. Her marriage brought the brief peace between the English and Powhatan, years known as the Peace of Pocahontas. A fragile harmony held together by her sacrifice. In time, the English took her across the sea to England. There, she was paraded before royalty as a curiosity, a symbol of the New World. People stared at her as though she were not a woman but a myth. She smiled, bowed, spoke in their tongue, but inside the forest still sang to her. And then, before she could return home, she fell ill. Some say it was disease, others believe it was sorrow. Pocahontas died in a foreign land, far from the rivers and trees of her childhood, just 21 years old. But that is not where her story ends. For though her body rests beneath foreign soil, her spirit lives on, in the forests of Virginia, in the stories of her people, in the rain that falls quietly between the pines. Some say that when the wind rises suddenly, carrying the scent of cedar and the whisper of a river water, that is Pocahontas passing through, watching, remembering, and sometimes on nights when the moon is full, if you walk softly through the woods and close your eyes, you can hear her voice, not in English, not in pain, but in the language of the earth, singing the old songs, the songs of balance and peace, the songs of a girl who walked between two worlds and became a spirit of both. Next, a darker chapter awaits as we explore the Witch of Salem. The cold in Salem was not the kind that merely beat at your skin. It found its way into your bones, settled behind your ribs, and never left. Snow crept between the crooked boards of cabins, and the howling wind carried more than just the sound of barren trees scraping against glass. It carried whispers, accusations, secrets. It was the year 1692, Salem Village, Massachusetts, a place gripped by faith, where every misfortune was God's punishment and every question of authority smelled faintly of sin. The villagers woke with scripture on their lips and fell asleep with fear in their hearts, fear of the wilderness, fear of the devil, and most dangerously, fear of each other. Her name was Sarah Good. Before they called her a witch, she had been a woman like any other. She had once had a husband, a home, and dreams stitched with small comforts, a garden of herbs, a warm hearth, a future for her daughter. But death came for her husband one winter, and with his passing went her land, her place in the village, and soon her name. They said she muttered curses beneath her breath when people refused her coins or bread. They said she stared too long, too intently, as if peering through you and seeing something unclean. She wandered Salem's muddy paths with her child clutched to her hip and her other hand outstretched, begging, some said, threatening, others claimed. But no one remembered that once Sarah had delivered babies with steady hands, healed wounds with her poultices, and sung to children when storms rattled the sky. No one remembered kindness when fear was in fashion. Then the minister's daughter screamed. She was 12 years old, eyes wide with terror, and mouth foaming with words not her own. She claimed she saw figures cloaked in black, strange shapes lurking in the corners, and a woman with stringy hair standing at the foot of her bed at night. Another girl followed, then another. The village doctor, finding no signs of illness, uttered the word that twisted the world off its axis: witchcraft. Panic spread like fire across dry timber. Children were no longer misbehaving, they were cursed. Food spoiled not by time, but by hexes. And when they demanded to know who had brought this plague upon their pious town, the girls' voices trembled with accusation. "Sarah Good," they whispered. She was dragged from her bed before dawn. Still in rags, her child sobbing as strangers bound her wrists. They shoved her into the meeting house, the walls thick with the scent of damp wool, sweat and dread. She stood tall, thin but proud, her back unbent. "I am no witch," she said. "You mistake your own guilt for mine." The magistrates looked down from their benches as if from mountaintops, holding scripture like a blade. "Do you deny speaking with the devil?" they asked. "I speak with none but my child and God," she answered, but her voice, tired and hoarse, could not pierce the fever of the room. The girls writhed on the floor, shrieking that Sarah's spirit clawed at their throats, that her eyes glowed red in the dark, that her breath chilled their bones. She was sentenced to hang. In the weeks that followed, Salem became a village ruled by silence and suspicion. The gallows were built atop a hill where no trees grew, as if even nature refused to watch. More names were spoken: Tituba, Rebecca Nurse, Martha Corey. One by one, the accused were marched through the mud as the villagers stood watching, mouths shut tight. And still, the sky stayed gray. On the day of her execution, the sun did not rise. Not really. The light came thin and pale, barely strong enough to burn away the morning fog. They brought Sarah to the gallows in chains. Her child clung to her dress until the constables pried her away. She did not weep. She looked out at the faces gathered below, neighbors, elders, those she had once called friends, and she said nothing until the rope was around her neck. "You call this justice?" she said, her voice rising clear above the hush. "You kill what you fear and call it holy." No one answered. The hangman pulled the lever, and the body of Sarah Good swung gently in the morning mist. But Salem did not sleep easy that night. Crows gathered on rooftops in unnatural numbers. Dogs howled at the woods. Fires sputtered without wind. And in the silence, people began to whisper again. Not about witches, but about the wrongness of it all. They spoke her name with guilt tucked behind her teeth. Sarah Good became legend. They said her ghost walked the path to the gallows each year on the day of her death. That children born with a streak of white in their hair had been marked by her vengeance. That she visited the dreams of judges, breathing frost across their pillows and pressing her cold fingers to their throats. But others told a different story. That Sarah's spirit did not seek revenge but remembrance. That she wandered the town not as a curse but as a warning. That every time a woman was silenced, her shadow stirred. That every time someone was cast out, shamed or broken by fear, she stood beside them, unseen but present. And still the wind carried her voice. Even now, centuries later, if you walk the woods near Salem and the sky is low and heavy, if the trees go quiet and your breath hangs too long in the air, you might hear footsteps behind you, a whisper beside your ear. I was no witch. But perhaps she became one after all, not by pact or spell, but by the fire of injustice, by the turning of the crowd, by the silence of the righteous. She became a witch because they made her one, and her story, buried beneath centuries of ash and shame, still rises whenever fear walks hand in hand with power, and truth is drowned in screams. The Bell Witch. In the early 1800s, deep in the rolling hills of Robertson County, Tennessee, where mists linger in the morning fields and the old trees whisper secrets to one another, there stood a farmhouse that would never be forgotten. It belonged to John Bell, a man of honor and hard work who had brought his family west in search of peace, land, and a future. The Bells were respected. They owned a tidy stretch of farmland near the Red River, where corn grew tall and livestock grazed on open pasture. Life was simple, honest, But one year, as the autumn leaves began to fall, something changed on the Bell farm, something unseen. It began small, a tapping on the walls at night, faint scratching behind the bedroom panels. John Bell thought it mice, his wife Lucy said it was the wind. But the noises grew louder and stranger. Doors slammed when no one was near them. Chains rattled beneath the floorboards. The children, especially young Betsy Bell, awoke with their blankets torn away, their hair pulled, invisible hands pressing cold against their skin. One night, as the family sat together by lamplight, the voice came, a whisper at first, croaking distant. "I am a spirit," it said. "I was once happy, but now I am tormented." No one slept after that. The voice grew bold, it laughed, sang hymns, quoted scripture, and it knew things, dark hidden things that no stranger should know. It could mimic the voice of any family member, finish their prayers before they could. It would speak sweetly to Lucy Bell and cruelly to John, accusing him of sins no one dared repeat. Neighbors came to listen. Ministers, skeptics, soldiers, all left pale and shaken. The spirit, now called the Bell Witch, could read thoughts, predict visitors before they arrived. She would mock preachers in Latin and tell secrets about people standing in the room, secrets that made grown men weep. But it was Betsy the witch hated most. The youngest daughter, barely a teen, was tormented nightly. Bruises bloomed on her arms. Her hair was yanked so hard it tore from her scalp. She was slapped, pinched, choked by invisible hands. The family tried everything, prayers, crosses, even moving Betsy to a neighbor's home. But the witch followed her, always. And then the witch made her demand. Betsy must not marry Joshua Gardner. Joshua was her childhood sweetheart. Kind, gentle, Betsy loved him dearly. But each time they spoke of marriage, the torment grew worse. The witch screamed through the walls, shattered dishes, slammed shutters open in the dead of night. Betsy grew thin, silent, hollow-eyed. And finally, with a trembling voice, she broke the engagement. The torment lessened, but John Bell's suffering only worsened. The witch hated him above all. She cursed him constantly, calling him Old Jack, swearing she'd kill him. His health began to fail. He grew weak, stumbled in the fields, his speech slurred, his body racked by tremors. One morning in December 1820, John didn't rise from bed. They found him pale, breathed shallow, with a bottle of black liquid by his side. When someone held it to the witch's voice, she laughed coldly and said, "I gave Old Jack a dose last night. He'll never wake again." And she was right. John Bell died that day. At his funeral, the witch shrieked and laughed, mocking the mourners, singing bawdy songs from the rafters. No priest could silence her. Then, as suddenly as she had come, she quieted. The attack slowed. The voice faded. A year passed. 2. Life crept back into the farmhouse, tentative, like sunlight after a storm. And then one evening the witch returned. To John Bell Jr., the son. Calmly, almost kindly she spoke. She said she had more to say. About the world, about time, about spirits and eternity. She spoke of war, death, invention. She told of events that had not yet happened, and many did just as she'd said. But after that visit she promised to go. "I will return in 107 years, she said, and then nothing. Decades passed. The Bell family scattered. The farm changed hands. The old cabin decayed, but stories remained. In 1935, descendants of the Bells reported strange noises, lights in the trees, voices whispering in empty rooms. Some say the witch had returned, keeping her word. Others say she never truly left. Today, near Adams, Tennessee, people still visit the Bell Witch Cave, a dark hollow on the old property where water drips like ticking clocks and wind moves with purpose. Some say they hear whispers. Some feel touched when no one is near. Some swear they've heard the voice, a woman's voice, mocking, laughing, warning. Locals still warn, never call her out, never mock her name, never ask her to show herself, because if she does, she might not go away. And maybe, just maybe, The Bell Witch was never simply a ghost. Maybe she was a reckoning, a spirit born of secrets and silence, summoned not just from beyond but from within, a mirror to a family, a town, even a time when voices were ignored and pain went unspoken. Maybe she was fury wrapped in shadow, justice dressed in fear, or maybe she was just a girl once wronged who found a way to be heard. And if you walk through those Tennessee woods just past sunset, when the sky turns bruised and the wind picks up, listen, because the Bell Witch still speaks, not in screams or moans, but in quiet breath against your neck, in creaking trees, in the sound of your own name, whispered when no one's around. She is still here, waiting, watching, remembering. Our next tale tells of Johnny Appleseed, the planter, with a generous heart. Long ago, when the heart of America was still untamed and wild, when roads were little more than deer trails and forests stretched as far as the eye could see, a man with a pot on his head and a sack of seeds over his shoulder walked into legend. They called him Johnny Appleseed, but he was born John Chapman in Massachusetts in 1774. He wasn't a large man, nor particularly strong, but something in his spirit made people stop and remember him. He had gentle eyes, a quiet smile, and a voice like soft wind through leaves. Some folks said he talked to trees. Others swore he sang lullabies to rivers, but all agreed wherever Johnny went, apples followed. He didn't ride a horse or travel in wagons. He walked, always on foot, bare feet no matter the season, through swamps, over mountains, across frozen creeks, past bears and wolves and storms. From Pennsylvania to Ohio and on toward Indiana, he traveled like a pilgrim, planting not just trees, but hope. He carried a leather satchel filled with apple seeds gathered from cider mills. Not the kind of apples you'd buy in a store today. His apples were wild, hardy, tart, better for cider than pies. But they could take root in rough soil and grow tall and strong without care. That's what Johnny wanted. Trees that could endure, trees that could provide. Wherever he stopped, he'd clear a patch of land and build a fence from branches and brush. Then, by hand, he'd press seeds into the earth, row after careful row. He would leave the orchard with a note to any passing settler: tend it, share it, plant more. And then he'd vanish down the trail. But he wasn't just a planter of trees. Johnny Appleseed was a messenger of peace. In a time when the frontier was scarred by fear, settlers afraid of native tribes, tribes mistrustful of settlers, Johnny walked between them. He spoke to everyone with the same kindness, the same calm. Many native communities respected him, called him a friend, even a medicine man. They said animals never feared him. Birds landed on his shoulders. Deer stood still as he passed. He carried no weapons, only books, most often a Bible or pages from one, rolled and tucked in his coat. He never asked for money. Sometimes he traded seeds for old clothes or a warm meal, but more often he gave more than he took. On bitter winter nights, he'd sleep outdoors under a tree, his only blanket the sky. If someone gave him shoes, he'd give them away to a child by morning. But he wasn't a saint. He laughed easily. He liked storytelling. He had a strange sense of humor and an endless supply of riddles. Children adored him. He'd sit by the fire and tell tales of talking animals and faraway lands, then tuck them in with a song as soft as wind through branches. And his trees grew. Year after year, orchard after orchard, his apple trees took root. Long after he left the place, families would drink cider from fruit that came from seeds he planted. Children who'd never met him would swing from his branches, carve hearts into his bark, rest in the shade he left behind. But even legends grow old. As the years passed, roads carved through forest towns rose up from cabins and fields. The word got faster, fences taller. But Johnny didn't change. He kept walking, planting, preaching. He was old now, white-haired, bent slightly, though his eyes still sparkled. He wore the same patched shirt, the same pot for a hat, dented and blackened from campfires. They say his last winter came quietly. It was March 1845. He had stopped at the settler's cabin near Fort Wayne, Indiana. He'd walk 15 miles that day through sleet and wind, stopping only to check on one of his oldest orchards. He spoke warmly with the family, shared a story, ate some bread, then lay by the hearth, arms folded across his chest. In the morning he didn't rise. He died peacefully, in his sleep, just as gently as he had lived. But Johnny Appleseed never truly left. Even now when the snow melts and the first blossoms bloom, people still speak his name. In the hills of Ohio and along Indiana streams, old gnarled apple trees still stand, some twisted with age, others blooming like they did 100 years ago. Farmers know which ones came from Johnny's seeds. They don't cut them down. They nod as they pass, as if greeting an old friend. There are statues of him now, books and songs and festivals in his honor, but none of that captures what he truly was. Johnny Appleseed was never about fame. He was about simplicity, about faith in the earth, in kindness, in the idea that one small act, one seed, could change the world if given time. He taught that giving was richer than taking, that peace was stronger than fear, that even in a wild, divided land, one man walking alone, planting apple seeds, could leave behind a forest of hope. And so, the next time you bite into a crisp apple or pass a blooming orchard in spring, think of Johnny, not as a fairy tale, not as a man in a pot hat, but as someone who walked through the heart of a young nation and left it sweeter than he found it, one seed at a time. Next, meet John Henry, the folk hero who raced against a machine. They say his hammer weighed 30 pounds and that his shoulders were wide enough to carry a mountain. But if you asked him what made him strong, John Henry wouldn't point to his arms or chest. He'd tap his heart, slow and steady, like the rhythm of a steel-driving song, and say, "This is where the strength comes from." The tale of John Henry begins not in a book, but on the lips of men whose backs bent under sun and sweat, whose hands knew the feel of hot iron and splinters. He was a railroad man, born into a time when America was stretching itself westward, rail by rail, steel by steel. The country was growing fast, hungry for progress, and the iron horse, the steam train, was the way forward. John Henry was born into slavery in the South, some say in Tennessee, others say West Virginia. No one agrees on where exactly, but they all agree on one thing: he was born strong. Even as a baby, they say, he gripped a grown man's thumb and nearly broke it. By the time he was a young man, he could split an oak log with a single swing and dig a trench faster than a team of mules. When freedom came, John didn't chase politics or preachers. He found his calling in the clatter and clang of steel. He joined a crew of steel drivers, men who drilled holes into rock by hand to lay explosives that cleared paths for the railroad. It was dangerous, blistering work. But John didn't complain. He didn't need to. With each swing of his hammer, he told the world who he was. He became a legend on the rails. They said he could swing a hammer so fast the sparks lit up the night, that he could drive more holes in an hour than 10 men working together. Wherever he went, folks gathered just to watch him work. Tall as a tree, muscles coiled like rope, he moved with rhythm, not fast, not slow, but true. His hammer sang against stone, ringing out a steady song of muscle and pride. But then came the day the machines arrived. It was in the heat of summer, when the sun hung low like a burning coin in the sky. A man in a fine suit, clean boots, and a smug smile stepped off a train with a strange-looking contraption behind him. It was tall and narrow, made of gears and pistons, and it hissed like a snake. "A steam drill," the man said proudly, patting the machine. "Does the work of 40 men, faster, cleaner, tireless." The crew fell silent. They looked at the machine, then at each other. If this thing could drill holes better than them, what would become of their jobs, their homes, their pride? But John Henry just stepped forward, calm as morning. "I ain't afraid of a machine," he said, gripping his hammer. "Let it race me, let it try." The man in the suit raised an eyebrow. "You want to challenge the steam drill?" "I want to keep my job," John said, "and the jobs of every man here." The railroad boss agreed. A challenge was set, man versus machine. At sunrise the next day, they would race. who could drill deeper and faster through the hard mountain rock. That night the camp was quiet. John sat alone, oiling the handle of his hammer, whispering to it like an old friend. His wife, Paul Bunyan, came to him. She had walked miles to be there. "You don't have to do this," she said, eyes full of worry. John smiled, though the corners of his mouth trembled. "If I don't, that machine wins more than a race. It takes our worth." He kissed her forehead and stood. "Tomorrow," he said, "I drive not just for me. I drive for every man who swings a hammer and sings to the sound of steel." At dawn the men gathered. The machine was ready, huffing, steaming, its gears gleaming in the sun. John stood across from it, sleeves rolled, 2 hammers in his hands, one for each arm, no tricks, just muscle, sweat and heart. The signal was given. The race began. The steam drill hissed and punched. It roared and clanged, chewing through the mountain like a hungry beast. But John sang with his hammers. Left, right, swing and drive, swing and drive. His rhythm was flawless. The mountain groaned under the blows. Dust flew like smoke. Blood oozed from his palms, but still he swung. Crowds gathered, shouting his name. Paul Bunyan stood in the front, hands clasped to her chest. She whispered with every beat, as if her words kept his heart from stopping. Minutes turned to hours. The sun climbed high. Then the steam drill let out a screech and shuddered to a stop. Its gear stuck, its motor overheated. It had given all it had. But John was still going. He drove the last blow so deep the mountain shook. Then he dropped his hammers and stood straight, chest rising and falling like waves. He had won. The crowd erupted. Men lifted him on their shoulders. But John didn't cheer. He smiled faintly, then stumbled. His knees buckled. Paul Bunyan caught him. He looked up at her, eyes soft and full of something deeper than pain. "Peace." "I beat that machine," he whispered. And then John Henry's mighty heart, his true engine, gave out. He died that day, right there beside the mountain he conquered. They buried him with his hammers beneath a tree that still stands. And the mountain? Folks say if you walk there on a quiet morning, you can still hear a hammer ringing, a heartbeat in the stone. John Henry didn't just win a race, he reminded the world that a machine could drill, but it couldn't dream. That a man's worth isn't measured in steel or steam, but in how he stands when the world tries to replace him. He was more than muscle, more than legend. He was the soul of labor, and the echo of every swing lives on. Now from mountains to swamps we travel to South Carolina to meet the lizard men of Scape. Or swamp deep in the heart of South Carolina lies a place both mysterious and eerie, the Scape or Swamp. It's a tangled, dark labyrinth of moss-covered trees, thick vines and murky waters that stretch for miles. For centuries, locals whispered stories about strange noises in the night, glowing eyes peering through the fog, and footprints that no human or animal could explain. But the one tale that has endured, capturing imaginations and fueling late-night campfire talks, is the legend of the lizard man of Scape or Swamp. The story begins in the summer of 1988 in a quiet little town near the swamp's edge called Bishopville. Folks in Bishopville lived simple lives, farming and fishing, always respecting the swamp's secrets. But that summer, something shifted in the air, a tension that no one could quite put their finger on. It all started with a series of reports from several locals who claimed they'd seen a creature unlike anything they'd ever imagined. The first sighting came from a man named Christopher Davis. Christopher was an ordinary guy, just your average mechanic, someone who spent more time under car hoods than out chasing legends. But one humid night, as he drove home from work along a lonely stretch of road skirting the swamp, everything changed. His headlights caught something moving on the side of the road, something tall and dark. At first he thought it was a large deer, but as he slowed down, the figure stood upright on 2 legs. Then, to Christopher's horror, the creature turned toward him, revealing glowing red eyes and skin that looked scaly and slick, like wet, greenish lizard hide. It let out a terrifying scream, a sound like nails scraping on metal, and then vanished into the swamp with astonishing speed. Christopher's story spread quickly, and soon others came forward with similar experiences. A teenager out for a midnight swim in a nearby lake reported being chased by a huge figure with claws and sharp teeth. A local hunter said he found strange three-toed footprints in the mud, prints so large and deep they couldn't have come from any known animal. The town was buzzing with fear and fascination. Was it some kind of mutated animal, a prankster, or something more sinister? The media caught wind of the tale, and soon journalists, cryptozoologists, and curious thrill-seekers flocked to Scape or Swamp. The creature became known as the Lizard Man, a name that stuck and grew with every retelling. People set up cameras, laid traps, and combed through the dense undergrowth, hoping for proof. But the swamp held tight to its secret, and the Lizard Man remained elusive, as if it knew it was being hunted. The local community was split. Some dismissed the stories as tall tales fueled by heat and superstition. Others, however, swore by the accounts and insisted that the creature was real and dangerous. Pet dogs went missing, livestock was found mauled, and strange sounds echoed through the night. Mothers kept their children close after sunset, and even the bravest hunters avoided certain parts of the swamp after dark. One night, a group of friends decided to confront the legend head-on. They were young, daring, and perhaps a little foolish. Armed with flashlights, a camera, and a recorder, they ventured deep into the swamp, determined to find the truth. The swamp was thick with fog, the air heavy and buzzing with insects. As they pushed through the brush, strange noises surrounded them, snaps, rustles, and distant cries that sounded almost human, yet not quite. Suddenly, a chilling roar split the air. The group froze, hearts pounding, eyes wide in the beam of their flashlights. From the shadows emerged a hulking figure, tall, muscular, covered in scaly green skin, with eyes that reflected the light like burning coals. Its claws scraped against a tree as it stared down at them, its breath visible in the humid air, smelling faintly of swamp mud and something wild. The friends ran. Their screams echoed through the swamp, but the creature did not chase. Instead, it watched them flee, then melted back into the darkness, disappearing like a ghost. The footage they captured was shaky and brief, but enough to stir up the legend anew. As the years passed, sightings became less frequent, but the story never died. The Lizard Man became part of the local folklore, a symbol of the wild, untamable forces lurking just beyond civilization. Some say it's a survivor from prehistoric times, a relic of a world long gone. Others believe it's a genetic mutation or an undiscovered species that adapted to life in the swamp's harsh, unforgiving environment. Scientists who have studied the swamp note that it's a rich ecosystem, home to many rare creatures, some of which remain undocumented. It's not hard to imagine that something unknown could exist there, hidden beneath the moss and shadows. But until solid evidence is found, the Lizard Man remains a legend, a story told in hushed tones, a mystery that dances on the edge of belief. What makes the legend so powerful isn't just the creature itself, but the way it captures something primal in all of us. The fear of the unknown, the thrill of discovery, and the wild pulse of nature fighting to survive in a world that's constantly shrinking around it. It reminds us that no matter how much we think we've tamed the earth, there are places still ruled by secrets. So if you ever find yourself driving near the Scape or Swamp, as twilight fades to night and the trees seem to lean in closer, listen. Maybe you'll hear that eerie scrape, that guttural growl carried on the humid breeze. Maybe you'll catch a glimpse of glowing eyes watching from the darkness. And if you do, remember the story of the Lizard Man of Scape or Swamp, the creature that lives where the wild things still roam, forever haunting the edges of our world. From swamp to desert, our next story uncovers the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. Nestled deep within the rugged Superstition Mountains of Arizona, shrouded in swirling desert mist and ancient whispers, lies one of America's most enduring mysteries, the Lost Dutchman's gold mine. For more than a century, treasure hunters, adventurers, and dreamers have been drawn to those jagged peaks, their hearts filled with hope and their minds haunted by the promise of unimaginable riches. But the mine, if it ever truly existed, remains hidden. lost to time, geography, and perhaps something more mysterious. The story begins with a man named Jacob Waltz, a German immigrant who arrived in America in the mid-19th century. Though he was known simply as the Dutchman because of his accent, Dutch being the common term for Germans at the time, Jacob was anything but ordinary. He was a miner, a prospector, and a man who understood the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Southwest better than most. According to local legend, Waltz discovered a secret gold mine somewhere in the Superstition Mountains, a treasure so vast that it could make a man rich beyond his wildest dreams, yet he never revealed its exact location. Jacob Waltz lived quietly for years, moving between small mining camps and towns, always keeping to himself. He worked hard, but he didn't flaunt wealth, and few knew of his secret. What made the story so tantalizing was the way it was passed down, through whispers in saloons, casual remarks by neighbors, and the frightened but fascinated tales of those who swore they saw him with bags heavy with gold nuggets. When Waltz died in 1891, he left behind no map, no journal, only a few vague hints and stories. But those hints were enough. Almost immediately after his death, treasure hunters flooded the Superstition Mountains. Some were driven by greed, others by curiosity or a desire to prove the legend true. They clambered over treacherous cliffs, waded through dry creek beds baked by the Arizona sun, and searched caves dark and silent for any sign of the lost mine. Yet no one found it. The mountains seemed to swallow their hopes whole. Many claimed to have come close. There were stories of old miners who followed mysterious symbols carved into rocks, found signs of abandoned camps deep in hidden valleys, or glimpsed strange metal tools rusting in the shadows. Some even said the mine was guarded by supernatural forces, ghostly apparitions, sudden storms, or a curse that befell anyone daring enough to try. These tales only deepened the mystery and drew more seekers into the wilderness. Among those drawn to the legend was a young man named Tom Bennett. Tom wasn't a prospector by trade, he was a teacher from Phoenix with a fascination for history and adventure. He grew up hearing the stories from his grandfather, who swore he met a man who had once worked with the Dutchman. Intrigued by the possibility of uncovering a piece of the past, Tom spent years studying maps, old letters, and local folklore. Unlike many others, he didn't just chase gold. He wanted to understand the man behind the legend. Tom's search led him deep into the heart of the mountains, where trails disappeared and nature reclaimed what man once touched. On a chilly autumn morning, he found himself standing before a cavern mouth concealed by thick brush. The air smelled of earth and something metallic, a scent that stirred something deep inside him. Inside the cave, faint marks on the wall suggested a human hand's work, scratches, symbols, maybe directions. His pulse quickened, but the mountains were unforgiving. Nights brought biting cold, and the isolation gnawed at his spirit. More than once he considered turning back. Yet every time he caught sight of those faded markings, he felt a connection, as if Jacob Waltz's spirit was guiding him. The Lost Dutchman's mine is more than just a tale of hidden gold. It's a story about hope, obsession, and the relentless human drive to discover what lies beyond the horizon. It asks a question that has haunted treasure seekers for generations. What would you risk for a dream? Over time, many who sought the mine found themselves changed. Some never returned, lost in the vast maze of canyons and cliffs. Others gave up, their pockets empty, but their hearts full of stories. And a few somehow claimed to have found glimpses of the truth, glittering veins of quartz, rusted tools, even golden dust on the wind. But just as quickly as they found these clues, they were swallowed again by the endless mountains. What makes the legend so captivating is its blend of fact and folklore. Jacob Waltz was a real man, whose existence is documented. The gold mines of the Southwest were real too, and many yielded fortunes, but the mine Waltz supposedly discovered remains elusive, a secret lost to history. Some believe it was simply a tale told to protect his find, or perhaps a myth born from dreams and desperation. Others are convinced it's still out there, waiting for the right person to unlock its gates. Local tribes have their own stories too, speaking of the mountains as sacred ground, guarded by spirits and ancient magic. Some warn that greed will bring misfortune to those who disturb the balance of the land. Others tell of the phantom miner, a shadowy figure glimpsed among the rocks, forever searching for a treasure that might never be claimed. Despite all the warnings, the legend refuses to fade. Every year, hundreds still visit the Superstition Mountains, drawn by the romance of the hunt and the chance to touch a piece of mystery. They camp beneath the stars, tell stories by firelight, and wonder if their journey will be the one to solve the puzzle. For many, the Lost Dutchman's gold mine represents more than gold. It's about adventure, the thrill of stepping into the unknown, the courage to chase something larger than oneself. It's a reminder that some mysteries are meant to endure, that some stories are kept alive not by facts, but by the fire in our hearts. So, if you ever find yourself wandering the jagged trails of the Superstition Mountains, watch the shadows carefully, listen for the whisper of wind through the canyons, the echo of a pickaxe striking rock long ago. Maybe, just maybe, you'll feel the pull of the Dutchman's secret calling you deeper into the wilderness, because the Lost Dutchman's gold mine isn't just buried in stone, it's buried in the very spirit of those who dare to dream, those who refuse to let the mystery die. And somewhere, beneath those ancient peaks, the treasure waits, still lost, still hidden, still alive. Finally, our journey ends in the Everglades, where the skunk ape roams deep in the sweltering wetlands and tangled forests of Florida's Everglades, where moss-draped cypress trees stand like sentinels over murky waters, and the air hums with the buzz of unseen insects. There lurks a legend that has haunted locals for decades: the skunk ape. This mysterious creature, often described as a towering ape-like beast covered in dark matted hair and carrying an odor so foul it could knock a grown man off his feet, has become one of the most talked about and feared figures in Florida folklore. But unlike many cryptid tales told in hushed tones far from civilization, the skunk ape story pulses with life because it is rooted in a place as wild and untamed as the creature itself. The origins of the skunk ape legend stretch back generations. Long before the first settlers hacked through the dense underbrush, Native American tribes who called the Everglades home spoke of a powerful and elusive being they referred to in their own tongues as a guardian of the swamp, a creature that watched silently from the shadows, feared and respected in equal measure. To them, the creature wasn't just a myth, but a force of nature, a reminder that the swamp held secrets beyond human understanding, and that some things were best left undisturbed. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the skunk ape re-emerged in the collective consciousness of Floridians during the 1960s and 70s, when sightings surged. It was a time of great change and tension in the state, a period when people began encroaching on the Everglades' fragile ecosystem in increasing numbers. Swamp hunters, fishermen, and park rangers alike began reporting strange encounters, mysterious footprints larger than a man's hand, guttural screams echoing through the night, and that unmistakable putrid stench that seemed to cling to the very air itself. The name skunk ape was coined because of this overwhelming smell, a nauseating mix of rotten eggs, musk, and swamp decay. Among the many who claim to have encountered the skunk ape, perhaps the most famous story is that of a local man named George. One late summer evening, George was out in his boat, tending to his fishing traps, deep within the tangled waterways of the Everglades. The humid air pressed heavy against his skin, and the only sounds were the occasional splash of fish and the distant calls of night birds. Suddenly, George caught a glimpse of movement along the shoreline. A massive, shadowy figure standing upright, watching him with glowing eyes that reflected the boat's flickering lantern light. The creature's presence was so intense that George said he could feel it, watching every muscle in his body tense. Then, without a sound, the figure vanished into the thick foliage, leaving behind only the pungent stench that would become George's haunting memory. Stories like George's spread through small towns and rural communities, and the skunk ape became more than a local curiosity. It was a symbol of the unknown wildness still alive in Florida. But skeptics dismissed the tales as hoaxes, misidentified wildlife, or the product of overactive imaginations fueled by the eerie environment. After all, the Everglades is home to alligators, bears, and other creatures that could easily be mistaken for something more mysterious in the low light and dense jungle. Then came the infamous 2000 sighting, when a man named Paul Smith captured grainy video footage that would ignite the legend like never before. Paul was camping with friends near the Big Cypress National Preserve when he spotted a large dark figure lumbering through the trees. Frantically, he filmed the creature as it disappeared into the swamp. Though the video was blurry and open to interpretation, it was enough to spark a nationwide debate. Believers hailed it as proof of the skunk ape's existence, while skeptics pointed to it as a clever hoax or misidentification of a bear. Regardless, Paul's footage became the most publicized evidence and rekindled the public's fascination with the creature. But beyond the videos and stories, what is most compelling about the skunk ape is its relationship with the land and the people who live alongside it. The creature seems to embody the spirit of the Everglades itself, resilient, elusive, and wild. In a state often associated with sunshine and beaches, the skunk ape reminds us there are still places where nature holds sway and where human footprints remain light. It's a living testament to the power of mystery and the unknown, a reminder that even in the modern world, legends can still breathe. Folklorists suggest that the skunk ape's endurance as a story reveals our deep human need to connect with the wild and the unexplained. In a world increasingly mapped and digitized, the idea that a creature like the skunk ape roams unseen through vast, untouched wilderness feeds our imagination and challenges our sense of control. It's a story about wonder and fear, curiosity and respect. Some say the skunk ape might be a relic species, perhaps a distant cousin of Bigfoot, or a primate unknown to science. Others believe it's a product of misperceptions, environmental stress, or simply folklore born from the swamp's eerie atmosphere. Yet, for those who have stood beneath the moss-draped branches, felt the humid breath of the swamp, and caught even a fleeting glimpse of something moving just beyond their sight, the legend is very real. Local guides now offer skunk ape tours, sharing tales around campfires and leading visitors through the dark trails where the creature supposedly roams. Their stories vary, but all carry a reverence for the swamp and its secrets. They tell of nights when the cries echo across the water and the pungent smell rolls in with the evening mist. They speak of eyes that glint from the shadows and footprints so large that no human could have made them. Whether you believe in the skunk ape or not, the legend invites us to look deeper into the wild places of our world and to wonder what else might be lurking in the shadows, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. It's a story about respect for nature's mysteries and the thrill of the unknown, a reminder that some stories don't end with answers but continue to live on in the hearts and minds of those who dare to listen. So, next time you find yourself wandering the trails of the Everglades as dusk falls and the swamp hums with life, pause and listen. Maybe, just maybe, you'll catch a whiff of that unmistakable scent, hear a distant call, or glimpse a shadow moving silently between the cypress knees. And if you do, you might have encountered the skunk ape, the wild guardian of Florida's untamed heart.